very, very interesting, fascinating, just a fascinating picture, a psychological picture of an American gangster. And I believe to the degree of my ability to recognize it, very authentic. Here is this man, he's a gang boss. He's the boy, they call him a boss, he's the head of all the gangsters. He's acknowledged as the authority. If anyone wants his job, they get into gang wars and kill each other. American gangsterism is not something that we have to be proud of, but it is definitely an American phenomenon that initially seemed to have been imported from Italy. Today we have the Russian mafia and we have the Chinese mafia. But there's something about the Italian mafia that is so attractive to people. It's fascinating. As I discussed this series with the Lord, that's what came to me. It's fascinating, okay? And who is it that fascinates us? Who was the first fascinator? Anybody? Who fascinated somebody in the Bible? What is the word fascination associated with?
I think the serpent.
The serpent, yes. The serpent's fascinating. A hypnotizing serpent. There's something about the mafia that is so attractive to straight people. The Lord has told me that it's an envy of power. That's what the Lord told me. If you're fascinated with the mafia, and I have to admit to it to a degree because that's how the Lord told me that, because I was falling under that. He said to me, it's a fascination of, or an envy of power. And I just know in my spirit it's to be true. So this is the most incredible psychological profile of an American gang boss, who is this very tough man. He has, he's a murderer. He's a murderer, yeah. And you see that side of him. You see, it's a complete oxymoron. It's a contradiction that makes no sense at all to my rational mind, that a man could be a murderer and be a righteous man. But the man had a righteous spirit on him. He only killed people that deserved to be killed. The whole problem is, who are you to decide who can be killed? But he's ready to punish the school teacher that's incesting, that's sleeping with the students. He has a righteous spirit concerning his children, and what's morally morally right from a social point of view, okay. And then what he does for a living is that if it's necessary, he kills people. He doesn't like to kill people, but if he decides it's necessary, he has no problem killing people. And he'll kill people who he determines vengeance should be vested upon. And then he goes home, and he's got this gorgeous house and this beautiful wife who pecks at him all the time. She has no fear. The whole world is terrified of him, okay? And his wife is very attractive, so from time to time, a man considers going after a married woman, and as soon as he finds out who her husband is, they run for their life. The guy is a known murderer, okay? Yet when he comes home, his wife has no fear of him. She pecks at him, she yells at him, she tells him to cut it out and grow up. It's just very interesting, brethren. And then his children are really, his daughter needed a quick smack in the mouth. And at one point, it comes out why he's not harder in his discipline on them. I mean, he will tell them off, but it mentions that these days, if you touch your children, they put you in jail. They'll take your kids away. So he couldn't discipline his children. Maybe your kids do need a whack. I mean, I don't think you should be beating your children, but I think that the scripture says a child that's rebellious, you need to take a rod to them. You know? But he couldn't do that. So the two kids, and one daughter and one son, were completely out of order. So he rebuked them with his mouth, and the wife rebuked them with her mouth. but the kids needed a stronger discipline than that, and a couple of times she was contradicting him. So she was, brother, can you see what I'm saying? This toughness, everybody's afraid of him, and his wife is telling him to shut up and grow up. Do you see the contradiction? And then his mother is evil. And brethren, it's very hard for people to even think that it's possible that a mother could be evil. But sometimes mothers are evil because mothers are people. And some people are evil, and sometimes evil people are mothers. So this particular mother had a borderline personality syndrome, which I've been interested in years. My opinion, and I don't know for sure because I've never spoken to a medical professional about this, but my understanding of the borderline personality, I used to say to the word, borderline of what? Borderline on what? It's more common to know about bipolar disorder. More people know about bipolar disorder. Either you're up and you're ecstatic, or you're down and you're depressed. They used to call it manic depressive, now they call it bipolar. But what is this borderline personality? Finally, after actually asking the Lord for years, the answer came to me a couple of years ago. You're a borderline sociopath. Now, I don't know if a psychiatrist would agree with that, but this is what the Lord told me. You're borderline sociopath. Which means you're not functioning in society, but you're not quite a sociopath. And I'm not that familiar with the criteria. I'm not a psychologist to say, well, if your behavior fits this, this, and this, you would be diagnosed as a sociopath. And if your behavior fits this criteria, you're not quite a sociopath. We'll just call you borderline. You're on the borderline. Well, according to this series, because this gang boss winds up seeing a psychiatrist. It is just so fascinating. He winds up seeing a psychiatrist because he's having anxiety attacks. Now, the anxiety attacks are not coming from his gangland experiences. The anxiety attacks are coming from his family. They're coming from his family, or if he did have one or two anxiety attacks concerning his business, it was because he had to bring a correction that it broke his heart to bring. And in his case, a correction is he had to kill the guy because someone that he trusted and sort of like a brother was betrayed him. So in his mind, he did what he had to do. He killed him, but then he has an well, if you've seen the videos, I don't want you to think I'm making a mistake. That may not be the exact moment, but he's had a couple of anxiety attacks concerning his business, not because he was horrified that he had to kill somebody, but because people betrayed him, and he had to deal with the people in a manner that made him unhappy. And that's why he's having these anxiety attacks. And my analysis of, I mean, Brendan, this is not just a TV series. This is an absolutely brilliant diagnosis of a man in this condition, where in my opinion, if he had been born under other circumstances, if he had been born to a professional family, for example, where everybody was a doctor, or doctors and lawyers and judges, he would have been a great man in society. The man actually had a spirit of righteousness with regard to people, tried to do the right thing, tried to help people. And even in his murders, if you can hear what I'm saying, would only do it under the right, in his estimation, the right circumstances. You know? And that's what he was born into. He was raised in that. It shows you that his father was a violent man who was out collecting money from people that had borrowed money and they had to go collect it. That was what he was born into, and that was how he earned his living, and that was what he became. But I have no problem seeing him born in other circumstances, being a completely upright citizen in society, and that's what happened to him, you see. And then in his society, there was a character named Richie who was, they were all violent. All of these characters, extremely violent men, okay? But righteous, except for Richie. So we see that there was a man, there was a character who was violent, and he was not righteous. He didn't have morals, okay? He, what did he do that he didn't have morals? He he beat a man so badly, ran him down with his car. He was sadistic. The man became a paraplegic, just out of vengeance. He was sadistic. Let me leave it with you with that. He was sadistic, and he didn't share the morals of Tony Soprano. And Tony despised him, didn't like him at all, recognized him as an immoral man within their sealed community. If you can hear this, fascinating study. Within their community, there was moral and immoral people. And Tony Soprano, who was the head boss, he was a moral man. Tough guy, everybody was afraid of him. The cops were out trying in every way to get him. And his wife picked at him almost continuously when he came home. Now, she, in favor of his wife, in all fairness to her, if there is a fairness, brethren, there's no excuse for picking at your husband, you see. No excuse for it. But he had a girlfriend, and apparently it was his having a girlfriend was a part of this whole macho culture that they lived in. They like lived in a fishbowl. It's not all Italian people. It was this particular Italian culture within Italian culture, okay? And they had their own moral and their own morals and their own rules. And if you were a man, you had a girlfriend, and they called her a Goomba. I'd never heard that term before. So his wife, she was really upset with him that he had a girlfriend. So I guess that's why she was picking at him all the time. But ladies, let me tell you, that's not how you get what you want. You see? And it's not just ladies; it's whoever is under authority. You don't get what you want by attacking the authority. You see? God doesn't honor it. That's not how it doesn't work like that. But anyway, I don't know what it's like to be married to a man that has a mistress. It must be very painful. But this is the culture. We're watching a study of this culture. If you were a man and you were anybody, you had a girlfriend. So he had this absolutely gorgeous Russian, a young lady 20 years younger than him, that he was keeping. And then his kids were very nasty to him. I think his daughter really needed a smack in the mouth. But both of the kids were not very nice to him. And so all of his troubles were his family. You can't murder your family. You can't beat up. And he loved them. He loved his family. So here's another contradiction. The man who was a cold-blooded murderer, when he thought it was justified, loved his family. He loved his wife, and he loved his children, and he was doing his best to take care of his mother, who was a borderline personality and evil. Well, I don't want to be insulting anybody that's listening to me that has a borderline personality, but this woman happened to be evil, and she happened to have a borderline personality. That's the best that I could do. And her two daughters had abandoned her, according to the show. Her two daughters had abandoned her years ago. Why? Because she was negative. There was no way to please her. No matter what they did, the children could not please her. No matter what they did, she put them down. She would not acknowledge any of their accomplishments, but made snide remarks that chipped away at their self-confidence. So the two daughters had abandoned her. Tony, however, wanted to, he was not, this was a really important part of the show, he was not acknowledging what she was. He knew that she was negative, but it was just his mother, and he loved her. And if he would come in and say it's a beautiful day, she would say it's disgusting out. You know, she just couldn't be happy. And according to the psychiatrist in the movie, that's one of the symptoms of borderline personality. They are people who are joyless. They just can't be happy. They'll always find something to be unhappy about. So he was putting up with it, taking care of his mother. But it turns out that his mother was evil enough to actually try to get him killed. So, and then you see how this mentality of murder and violence, how it touches the women in the culture. It shows you how the women deal with it. Fascinating. So his mother, and how do you deal with it when you're a woman in that culture? You have to deal with it passively, you know, by manipulating the one that has the gun to do what you want him to do. See, so his mother was controlling with her negativity. Brethren, if you see yourself in this profile, or if you know anybody like this, you need to know that continuous disapproval, or that disapproval, unless it's legitimately motivated, unless it's a godly disapproval, is control. That we control people with our disapproval, especially if it's your children or your mate, someone that's close to you, someone that is hoping for and expecting love from you. When all that they get from you is disapproval, you need to know that it's literally spiritual murder of their soul, when they simply cannot please you. You are destroying their soul. So Tony was just putting up with her and say, "Oh, my mother, she's driving me crazy." And the woman was getting older. And she really couldn't. She really needed to be in assisted living, but she didn't want to go into assisted living. Tony's wife, at least 3 or 4 times, they showed you sincerely invited her to come live with them. She said no, and then went and told everybody that. Why can't I remember her name? His wife. What?
Camilla?
Camilla, thank you. What? His wife. And she went and told everybody that his wife wouldn't take her in. And she really sincerely would have taken her in. She was a kind woman. So we see the different female reactions to this violent culture, and Carmela's reaction to it was to become a religious Catholic. See? She was all into her Catholicism and her religion, but it's revealed throughout the series that I like Camilla. I like her. I liked her. But she was a hypocrite, you see, because she took the spoils of her husband's gangster profession. She took the big house. She took the fur coat, you know. She took the money. She took it all, see. And part of that lifestyle was that he had a mistress, see. So she tolerated what he was doing, although he never really told her, but she knew what he was doing. And she tolerated the mistress, but she didn't tolerate the mistress because she picked at him continuously, which probably drove him to the mistress away from her. See. But as much as I liked her, she took the spoils of that violent life. See. Then we see his sister who rejects that life and goes out and becomes a hippie, right? And now this I'll get back to his mother in a minute. This was really interesting. His sister Janet, she made at least one statement that I heard her say, where she called him something to the effect of, well, this male culture, the males, these emotional, and it wasn't this, I'm making it up because I can't remember exactly what she said, emotional cripples, something like that. In other words, they walk around and they're so macho and they have guns and they kill people, but they're emotional cripples, basically in that they weren't very affectionate to their wives, except Tony really loved his wife, but they were distant from their women. It was all a control issue, me man, you woman, and sex was the primary connection. Sometimes even marriage people won't go beyond sex. They will not enter into the emotional intimacy that should be, in my opinion, should be present in marriage. They don't go beyond the sexual intimacy, which usually, in most instances, leaves the woman frustrated, because the man won't take that next step to that emotional intimacy. And we see that's what's happening in the culture today. There's all of this talk about sensitizing the men and making them more understanding. But the result of all that is that they're killing the manhood in the country. So whether there's no answer to some of these problems, the only answer is Jesus Christ, you see. For a man to stay strong and take care of his family and discipline the children and do whatever he has to do, it weakens him in that role when he becomes more sensitized and more understanding, and the sensitivity training and everything that we see going on in the Western world today, it weakens him, and we see the men generally being weakened in the country. So the answer is Jesus Christ, brethren. Okay. Anyway, so she comes back from out of town, and she makes this comment. In other words, she's left that culture, see. She has rejected that macho culture, and she sees those men as emotional cripples, and she's above it. And what do you think happens to his sister Janet? She falls in love with the most corrupt of all of them. She falls in love with the gangster who is the one that Tony Soprano says has no morals. That's the one that she winds up with, the worst of them. See? It's like if you've seen The Godfather, it's the same principle there. The youngest guy who was Al Pacino, he was going to escape from that whole culture. Okay? But when he was drawn back in, he became the most severe gangster as Godfather of all of his brothers. It's just something inside of you. Brother. You can only overcome it in Jesus Christ. You can run away from it, you see, but it's inside of you. Only Jesus Christ can change you. It's something inside of you that you cannot escape. I saw another movie not too long ago which made this principle, and I think I mentioned it to you. It was about a scholar, a man who was a college teacher. He had many degrees, and he was a part of that world called academia. And he wound up in an affair with a woman. I hate to use these words, but you have to face the reality. There are different grades of society, and I hate to use the words lower, higher, but I don't know how else to describe it to you. She was of a lower cultural degree than himself. She worked as a waitress, and they were miles apart, okay? Culturally and financially, miles apart. And the girl was promiscuous. He had not been promiscuous. He was a widower. What did he have in common with her? And his friends were trying to tell him, what do you have in common with this woman? She's not for you. She's going to drag you down. And the bottom line, because I want to get back to the Sopranos, the bottom line was that they had something in common that was invisible. It turned out that this scholar, okay, that he was a black man, that he was the only one in his family that was white because of the way the genetics came out. The whole family was black, and he rejected his family. He chose to live in the white world and to escape dealing with the prejudice by denying that he was black. And his mother, I think his family rejected him. He gave up his family. And he had that wound deep inside of him from whatever he had experienced as a black man, the rejection that he had experienced. But when people knew that he was black, whatever caused that wound in him to make him decide to give up his whole culture, including his family, he had a deep wound inside of him. And it turned out that the woman, although she was living on this low cultural and spiritual level because she was promiscuous, that she had grown up in a wealthy home, and she had been abused and raped and incested and had run away and had culturally and socially and financially fallen down into this world because she wouldn't stay in that financial world where she was being molested. So she was deeply wounded, betrayed by family members. So she had fallen from a high cultural and financial place down to this low financial place and spiritual low place. And he had been and from a poor family and became upper middle class because he was a well-known college professor and a writer, okay? So she was high and she fell, he was low and he ascended culturally, and their wounds brought them together. You couldn't see it on the outside, but the inner wounds of the two of them, okay? Neither one were what they appeared to be, okay? The college professor was not what he appeared to be. What he was, that he was denying, was that he was a black man that had achieved in this country. And you see, when he dies, his sister comes to the funeral, and that's how we find out that he was black, you see. He was a black man that had from a humble home that had achieved, but nobody knew because he was hiding his background. She was born into a wealthy home that molested her and violated her, and she fled from it. So they both were the opposite of what they were. She was born into money and fell down. He was humble and came into money, okay? And their wounds drew them together. See, that was the point of the movie. Their wounds that you couldn't see by looking at them drew them together. Just giving up his family wounded him, but he made a decision to do it. Didn't see his mother again, even after she died. So that's what happened with Tony Soprano's sister, Janice. She physically fled from that culture. But she couldn't find a man that she was willing to settle down with. She had her affairs, but she was going from one man to the other. When she finally found someone that she was crazy, madly in love with, he was the worst of the crop of what she had fled from. Brethren, you have to hear this. See? A leopard can't change its spots. Only Jesus Christ can change your spots. You see? And I'll tell you something else if you want to be willing to hear this. This lesson applies to homosexuality. See? If you think you're born that way, and maybe you were, I don't know. And you think, well, what's popular today is to say, well, I can't change. You can't change me. I was born that way. See? Then you have to live an asexual life. See? Whether it's homosexuality inside of you, or whether it's something inside of you attracting you to a murderer who, once you're married, would beat you and abuse you. See? And that means you have to stay single. If you can hear what I'm saying. I've given you testimonies like this about one woman that she married 3 or 4 times. Each one of the men turned out to be an adulterer when there was absolutely no sign of it in the beginning of the marriage. They all wound up cheating on her. What was it inside of her that picked these men? See, something inside of the man that didn't show, and something inside of her was drawing her to this kind of abuse in her life. So if you can't get it fixed, maybe psychoanalysis can help you, I don't know. And even if Jesus helps you, it's a long process. You don't get to live it from that overnight. That's not a spirit that's cast out of you. That's a corruption of your soul that needs to be remolded in the righteous image of Jesus Christ. So if you don't have that kind of fix to your problem, then you stay single. See? That's the truth. That's the truth. That's the spiritual truth of that life and our fallen condition that Paul was trying to tell you when he said to you women, if you can't live with that man, if you can't live with him, leave him, but remain single. Because that whatever it is in you that marries someone that beats you, you'll be attracted to the same kind of man again. Stay single and serve God. See? So she left the culture, Janice Soprano. And when she came back, she fell in love with the worst of the barrel there, scum, by Tony's own words. And she's crazy in love with him, willing to tolerate little, brother, there's always signs. There are always signs that you shouldn't be with that guy, or you shouldn't be with that woman, but you ignore those signs because because your emotions want to be with that person, you see. So she knew he was crazy. He wanted, the one thing that they show you, I really wonder if this was based on someone, the situations were so authentic that you have to believe that there were people involved in this production that had some contact with this culture. And I just wonder if what I'm about to tell you was a story that they actually heard from somebody, that this guy liked having sex holding a gun to the woman's head. It gave him a thrill, so of course he wasn't forcing it. I guess he had rape fantasies, so he wanted his girlfriend to have sex with him while he was holding a gun to her head. And she's saying, well, that's okay. That's okay, it doesn't hurt me, I can do that for him. That was in the one of the episodes. So the guy's nuts, and you see, has all this violent potential, okay? And now they're getting engaged, and they have this big engagement party, and they're buying a house, and already now the guy's changing because people change when you get married, brethren. They change when you get married. Now, they've already been living together, but now they're getting married, see? So she doesn't like something that he's doing, and she opens up her mouth to him, and he finally shows his true colors. He says, shut up and get my dinner. And she won't shut up, so he hauls off and he smacks her. Really laid one on her. She had a big bruise. So what does she do? She's crazy in love with this man, the love of her life, rather the corruption inside of her, found the corruption inside of this man. Okay, her head was in the toilet bowl somewhere. And now he hauls off and he smacks her. She goes and she gets a gun, and she kills him. She shoots him dead. Then she's hysterical, crying over the body how much she loves the man. So whether that's a confused person. See? Either by the grace of God you find some way through either psychiatry or God or to live a balanced life despite those roots, or you stay single. See? But no one's listening to my advice. No one out there is listening to my advice, if they can even hear my advice. They're all going and getting married based on familiar spirits, something in the culture that attracts them. And they're not going by their head, they're going by their emotions. And they think that this guy is different, or that woman is different. Well, can't you see they're different? And then as soon as you get married, or after the first year, then they revert to what they revert to not only what they really are, but what you were attracted to, that you were in denial of. See? So his sister Janet is all screwed up, and then she leaves because she murders the guy, and Tony Soprano covers it up for her. And the mother is evil, and she hates her son. Now, I want to tell you, brethren, that's really hard to believe, that there are mothers that could hate their children. But I'm telling you that I've seen it. And it's not a popular thing to say because people don't want to hear that a mother could really hate her son. But I've seen it. I've seen it. Not in my immediate family. I don't want you to get the wrong idea, but I've seen it. I've seen a mother hate her child. So she hates her son. He only wants to please her. He only wants to take care of her. He's ignoring all of her negativity. And he finally decides that she has to go to assisted living. And that's her excuse. But she hated him before that. Control, brethren. He put her in assisted living. She was so mad at him that she was able to influence a relative to put out a contract on him. Now, brethren, this is like the ultimate end of control. Control is a big problem in culture, but different people will go to different extremes. See? The greatest extreme that I've ever seen with somebody that can't control me is that they cut me off and they won't talk to me. They've utterly failed to control me. So the only thing they have power to do is to say, I won't let you in my life. See? That's the extent of control that I've experienced, and that's in my family. And it's pathological, brethren. But here, the mother goes one step further. Okay, now would she go that step further if she was not a part of that culture? Probably not. See? So she has a relationship with her dead husband's brother, Tony's uncle. And there's all of this competition because they're all gangsters and fighting over the territory, whatever. See? And so the uncle had some ought against Tony. And to see that, brethren, I've witnessed this. How she planted the seed in this man's mind. How she never, if you went back to it, she would say to you, what did I say? She just asked a question, or she lied, or very, very subtle. So this uncle, Tony's uncle, goes out and puts a contract on Tony's life and tries to kill him, but he escapes because he's the hero of the series, so he has to escape. His own mother, because she's so angry at him that he put her in this assisted living. But in my opinion, it's more than that. It's an anger that goes much deeper than that. It's a need, it's a pathological need to control that went one step further than cutting the person or than saying, I won't talk to you anymore. It's a need to control, which is, it's in every culture, brethren, only it's in degrees of pathology. The pathology of control comes in degrees. And if you're going to be a son of God, you need to ask the Lord if there's any control in your life and to show it to you so that you can renounce it. See? Now there is a godly control. If you have children, you have a control. If you're running a household, you have control. If you're running a ministry, you have control. There's a godly control. I'm talking about motive. See? If your motive for control is to run a tight ship so that everybody can benefit and prosper, then you're not in any trouble. If your motive for control is because you're in a power play with that person, then you've got a problem and you really need to get before God and start working on it before it gets out of hand. Except that very few people can recognize control in their own lives. So if you're listening to me and you want to go on with God, and you're smart, you would say, Lord, please show me all my areas of control, ungodly control, so that I can deal with it. See? So his mother was, brethren, there are evil people in this world. See? Now here's a question for you, brethren. Who is the evil one? Tony Soprano, who was a cold-blooded murderer, according to his justice, at least according to justice, although it's his justice, who's trying to raise his family and is concerned about his family, including his mother, as opposed to his mother, who has never murdered anybody, probably would never try, but is a spiritual murderer that destroys the soul of anyone that she was destroyed the soul of her children, and actually manipulated an uncle to put out a contract on her own son. Well, let's say she didn't put out the contract on Tony. How do you compare these two people? Someone who is a cold-blooded murderer and is really trying to help his family. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Trying to live for his family, concerned, trying to run the household, to be a father and a husband. Okay. And a woman who has such a pathological need to control her children that she's murdering their souls through disapproval. How do you weigh this, brethren? How do you weigh this and stay sane? See? Brethren, this is the issue that Jesus was talking about. It's the exact issue that Jesus was talking about when he said, if you've hated your brother, you've already murdered him. Jesus deals with motives. Now, as far as Tony is concerned, he is a murderer, and if and when the law can prove it, he needs to pay for his crimes. See? But in my opinion, Tony is a candidate for the forgiveness of sins, whereas his mother is not. But then some people, now I can't tell anybody you can't have your sins forgiven, but there are some people, some personalities who are not candidates to have their sins forgiven. They're too evil. Brethren, that's what happened when that's why there was a flood. That's why there was a flood. The personalities, the majority of personalities was so evil, and that evil is measured in your relationship to each other. They were so evil to each other that Jehovah wiped out the whole human population. He just let the soul survive. Only that which was in the water survived. Tony Soprano, a cold-blooded murderer, is a candidate for salvation. His mother, in my opinion, was not. Brethren, if you don't get this, you need to pray about it. If you can ask me, I'll try and help you. If you want to be a son of God, you have to get this, because this is what it's all about. This is what being a son of God is all about. Knowing people by their motives. How could God forgive a murderer? He could forgive a murderer that murderer, if you can convict that murderer that they were wrong. But someone that is so evil that they want to control you to the point of destroying your soul to satisfy some need in themselves, there's no room there, short of an outstanding miracle. Maybe the power of God will fall down on you and give you a miracle. Short of that, there's no hope for you, for that personality. You have to die, and then your soul has to reincarnate and try again. Jesus talked about, was it Jesus? No, I think it was the Old Testament. Talks about evil figs. Now the fig tree typifies Israel. And the prophet, I think it was Isaiah, either Isaiah or Jeremiah, I think it was Isaiah, talks about figs that are so evil that they cannot be eaten. What does that mean, they cannot be eaten? It means that the Spirit of God, Jesus Christ, or before Jesus appeared, Adam could know himself, wants to consume us so that we can become his skin. When we eat the meat of a cow, that meat winds up as flesh on our bones. So the parable or the metaphor is that the Word of God wants to eat us, he wants to consume us, he wants to blend with us, and then our place in the new creature is that we're the skin on the outside, which is inseparable from him. So the prophet talks about figs, members of Israel, that are so evil that they cannot be eaten. There's no way to join them to God. Nobody wants to hear that. Parents killing children, children killing parents. There's evil in this world. And that's the sign of a dying culture. When people become evil towards each other, as crazy as it sounds, when the people are pulling together as a loving family, and then family members go out and murder to support the family, so to speak, that those people can be helped. Once you start being evil towards other people, especially your immediate family, whether you're in spiritual trouble, you need to know you're in severe spiritual trouble. And you really need to cry out to God to help you. So that's Tony Soprano, his mother. I talked to you about his wife. I talked to you about his children. I talked to you about his sister. Well, then there's the psychiatrist. The psychiatrist is a very interesting character. And the writers used her to demonstrate this fascination for mafia types. She takes on Tony Soprano as a client, knowing that he's a murderer. And she becomes very attractive to him. So I don't know, and don't anybody tell me if by the end of the series, if she winds up sleeping with him or not, I don't know. But she's fascinated by him. And you see how she's resisting that as a psychiatrist. You have to resist these feelings that come forth so that she can treat the man. But it's very obvious in the series that she's fascinated with his violence. People are fascinated with the whole culture, the violence, the machoism, the money, everything that comes in from a man's point of view. For the women, it's like a description of hell, brethren. Lots of sexual corruption there. And what's interesting, that I find interesting, I don't have anything else to say about the psychiatrist right now, except that she becomes an alcoholic. Something in her. Now, what's interesting is that she's Italian. She is from an immigrant Italian family that is not mafia. The hardworking people came to this country And like so many other immigrants that come, their children wound up getting a better job. She became a psychiatrist. And the family's a prosperous family, and they're a legitimate family. So we see them having a family dinner talking about how the stain of these other Italians fall upon them. And it shows the conflict in that Italian family that's not mafia. And you see something in her is attracted to the violence in him, because that's what it is. It's the attraction of the violence in him, just the power that he walks in. And also, what I find very interesting is that the character, the actor that they took to play his part, is not an attractive man. He was not a good-looking man in the series. He was a big guy, but his face was not particularly handsome. He was losing his hair. He was overweight. He had some compulsive eating problems. He was really not a good-looking guy. And yet, he was that attractive. So, it wasn't his looks, you see. It's the power that's on the man, that power. She was attracted to it. She was fascinated by it. And at one point, she throws him out and tells him she never wants to see him again. And then she calls him and takes him back. And that was a turning point in her life, because at one point he threatened her. You know, whether psychiatrists tend to tell you things that you don't like to hear, that get you angry. So I've had people here call me a spiritual psychiatrist. I tell you things you don't like to hear, and people get very angry at me. So actually what I think he threatened her about was when she told him the truth about his mother, you see. Up until the point that he found out that his mother actually manipulated his uncle to put out a contract on his life. And that was admitted in the series. Going in retrospect, the uncle, after the attempt failed, it got out on the street that the uncle had been seduced by this little old woman that looked so helpless. And he was the laughingstock. So it's an established fact in the series that his mother tried to get him killed. So the psychiatrist, she tries to tell him the truth, that his mother has borderline personality. And he grabs her by the throat. He really scared her. You know, he was going to mash her face in, but he didn't do it. And he leaves and she locks the door, and she won't treat him. And then you see how that she has this ungodly soul time with him that was established. Although she sits there on a seat separate from him, something inside of her connected with something inside of him, and she was caught. She was trapped in a spiritual way. So now hear this, brother, she physically ran from him. She told him she wouldn't treat him. She physically ran from him. After that, he went looking for her and found her in a diner and said he wanted her to continue to treat him, and she told him no, to get out of there or she was going to call the police. So she physically took the victory, but that connection continued to work inside of her until she took him back. She called him up and said she has an appointment for him. I think it may have been as much as a year later. That was her downfall. Whether once you escape, don't go back. We saw that it happened with Lot. Once you escape, don't turn back. So she started seeing him again, and shortly after that, she started drinking. And the series shows her seeing her psychiatrist. Now, psychiatrists, I don't know about psychologists, but I know psychiatrists, at least the way it used to be, was that they had to have their own psychiatrist to be in practice. So she was seeing, and I don't know if that was the case or not, but she was seeing her own psychiatrist, who kept telling her, why do you take him back? And she's deceiving herself, saying it's because he needs help and he's a patient, and she felt that she abandoned him, but it's a lie. See? She's hooked. She's hooked, and that's why I said earlier, don't anybody tell me. I'll find out in due season whether or not she ever actually sleeps with him, because he would like to sleep with her. And she's sitting there all prim and proper as the professional, and she's not yielding to that thought or that desire, but she's turning into an alcoholic over it. She admits to her psychiatrist that she only drinks either before or after she sees him. I don't recall which it is. And not only is she becoming an alcoholic, but she's taking on violent characteristics. Now here's this a sophisticated, genteel woman, soft-spoken, and now she's becoming aggressive. And she actually starts a fight with somebody in a restaurant. She's taking on Tony Soprano's personality characteristics. So I don't know what the end of that story is yet, except that she's in a lot of trouble, and a psychiatrist is saying to her, why don't you give him to somebody else? No other psychiatrist will take the case. And she won't give him up because she thinks they will be abandoning a patient, but she's just deceiving herself, and her psychiatrist knows it. And that's the point in the series that I see her. She's an alcoholic. She's really trapped. And if I had to guess, I don't know how the series turns out, but looking at that kind of situation, I would say it would be just a matter of time until she sleeps with him. Tony Soprano, fascinating man, not at all attractive man. Nothing attractive about him at all. The producers and the directors, they deliberately picked, in my opinion, a man that was not physically attractive to make that point.